Wuthering Waves has been out for a while now, and to say that it is highly popular would be an understatement. In fact, it has been taking the gacha mobile gaming market by storm ever since its release. Pretty much everyone has compared it to Genshin Impact, and some have hyped it up to be the one that brings it down even before its release. As for me, who has never touched Genshin Impact, I don't really care all that much, though I'm glad that the game is doing well, and I hope that it continues to be just as popular in the future. A big part of what makes Wuthering Waves so well known is the marketing. It looks like Kuro Games finally learned from their big mistake with punishing Grey Raven and actually decided to market this game. And when a game garners so much attention, I think it's safe to say that many had high expectations of this game before its release. So, does Wuthering Waves live up to the fans' expectations? I suppose that depends on said expectations, which can vary for each person. Okay, since this video is about my first impressions, here's an easier question. Does Wuthering Waves live up to my expectations? I would say most of my expectations were met, although I was let down from time to time. I played through all of the main story, at least whatever is currently accessible, and all of the big side quests along the way. In the background, you'll see footage of my journey lifted from my streams a while ago. I'll go through what I expected to see and what I ended up getting. When logging in for the first time, the game immediately told me to choose the gender of the main character, henceforth referred to as the Rover. I would have preferred if the developers gave players an option to change the settings first, but I guess it's not too big of a deal. Usually I play as female characters, especially if they are customizable because waifu, I guess. But this time, in this game alone, I couldn't choose between them. Whoever designed the Rover did very well, as both designs were great, not to mention the different animations and personality given to each version. Not knowing which Rover would suit me better, I left the choice up to my faithful coin. I got the almighty coin here. Head is male, tails is female. Let's go. I'll do a best of 3, that was heads. Heads, okay then. Thankfully, I was given the male Rover, because as I would soon find out, he would be the only male major character I would be seeing for a while. The game starts out with a beautiful cutscene which will apparently have greater meaning down the line. Before I begin, note that this game has some flashing lights, so an epilepsy warning will be in effect. After the cutscene, I was introduced to two major characters, Lucia 2.0 and Genderbent Lee. These nicknames didn't come out of nowhere, by the way. You see, Wuthering Waves has several characters that are basically PGR characters brought forward. For those who are familiar with PGR, it can feel like the designers just copied their own homework and changed a few things. I'm personally fine with it as long as there are enough differences in gameplay, but in this case they didn't differentiate them enough. Maybe the developers wanted to ease PGR players into this game by starting the game with characters that seem familiar to them. Speaking of the developers, Kuro Games is quite well known for their generosity and sense of humor, which helps connect them to their player base. However, they are also known for the large number of localization issues in their games, and from what I can tell, it gets far worse in this one. Unfortunately, English isn't the only language that suffers from this issue. Along with these issues, I quickly noticed that the text presented on screen would sometimes exceed the space that the text box provided, and being unable to scroll down, I was robbed of potentially important information. Tacit Discord. So these are the monster enemies born within. It's stronger? I don't know. For now it should be safe. The text like cut off over there. The game also threw many terms at me such as Resonator, Tacet Discord, and Tacet Field, which the game didn't bother to explain. The game is full of these terms which were apparently named after sound or music terminology. Without any explanation, players must simply figure it out, which is not a good way to introduce players to a new setting. It wouldn't have been difficult to simply have one of the two characters accompanying the Rover who has lost his or her memories to explain what these terms mean, but I guess that's not important enough to put into the game. For now, the only things that are relevant are the ones I've listed. Resonators are basically people with some form of special powers, Tacet Discords or TDs are basically otherworldly monsters, and Tacet Fields are corrupted landscapes where TDs spawn. Speaking of TDs, the game introduces us to some of them in a rather short tutorial, where it also teaches players about switching characters, intro and outro skills, and resonance liberations, which most people call ultimates. I refer to them as super moves or supers because I can't get fighting game terminology out of my head. So if you were to watch my streams, that's what I'm referring to. The tutorial could have handled things a bit more smoothly, but it is serviceable, at least for me, since I've been into action games for a while now. Shortly after the tutorial, the game introduces players to a Tacet Field, and along with that, a bunch of exposition and a new character. This is the game's first healer, Mommy Liv. But we're barely given any time to talk to her before we're given our first challenge. Oh, hello. Man, special effects here. The Crownless acts as the first boss in the game and follows the design philosophy of the more recent bosses in PGR. It is well balanced and not too difficult, and is introduced like the first boss in a Dark Souls game. During the fight, the game provides tutorials for dodging, counterattacks, the ability to focus the camera on a target, and the vibration meter which immobilizes the target when emptied. Having these in the middle of a boss fight was a terrible decision because these tips distract players from the only thing they're supposed to focus on. I think that a longer tutorial before the boss that introduces these mechanics one at a time would have been a better choice, since it would give players a bit more time to familiarize themselves with the combat before they face a boss which acts as a test of skill and knowledge. Phase 2. Oh, I suppose I should be quivering right now. When the weakness appears, press this to counterattack. Sekiro something. When it drops to 0, the enemy is stunned. Okay. What the? That's something new. Oh. E. Wait, that's the funny PGR thing, the dopamine thing. There we go. Well, that wasn't so bad. Going back to the Crownless, it is unfortunate that some of the cutscenes present during the technical test and beta versions of the game were removed. The developers should have left them in so that this boss would leave a better impression. Many commenters in comparison videos felt that it had the most intimidating presence during the first closed beta test, and I echoed the same sentiment. After defeating the boss, I was directed to the city of Jinzhou after receiving a message from its magistrate Jin Si, but first I was given a tutorial about echoes and how they work. Occasionally, enemies will drop echoes which come with stats to boost your character's strength. They can also assist your character in combat with moves that ideally complement your character's element or role. Echoes also come with the Sonata effect, and equipping multiple of these on the same character provides them with buffs. For those familiar with PGR, these are basically the 2-set and 4-set memory bonuses, and both are just as important when building characters. Cooldown 15 seconds, healing bonus plus 10%. Increase the attack of all party members by 15% for 30 seconds upon healing allies. Why is this not the default? UX moment. Anyway, in my opinion, echoes are a good addition to the game, although the sheer layers of RNG present is quite absurd. You see, there are multiple rarities of each echo in the game, and unlocking higher rarities requires a lot of farming. When obtained, an echo comes with 2 random stats and a random Sonata effect. Upgrading an echo allows you to increase the number of stats tied to it, but those stats are also random. Multiply that by 5 per character and increase that even further depending on your definition of good enough, and I hope you can see why this is a problem. I think that this is the only downside to having echoes in this game. Perhaps guaranteeing a single stat on each new echo would make this less tedious. In comparison, all I need to do for an optimal memory set for a PGR character is farm event stages, purchase the memories in the event shop, and level them up. All that's left are overclocks and hypertunes, which take time instead of luck. After completing the echo tutorial, the game directed me to Jinzhou again, but allows me to explore the world. Since killing enemies found in the open world is required to obtain stronger echoes, having the tutorial take place then was a good choice. And now that the world has opened up, I think this is a good time to talk about the environment. Overall, this game looks pretty good in my opinion. The environment is interesting enough and there are many unique landmarks that draw attention towards them, which encourages exploration. The open world also has a good amount of verticality, and I frequently found myself running up mountains and descending into caverns to find items and enemies. I'm quite impressed how the developers filled the open world with so many things to do. Sometimes I came across simple puzzles or groups of enemies which are tied to treasure chests. Some puzzles provide items that you can pick up and throw, and when I came across an enemy while trying to solve a puzzle, I tried to throw one at it to see if this game treats physical objects like it's Half-Life 2 or something. Needless to say, I was a little disappointed. The devs probably be like, oh, people thought of this, and we won't allow them to do that. Yeah. I also find the rewards a bit puzzling because they don't always correspond to the level of difficulty of certain puzzles or enemies. When it comes to water, I'm not a big fan of how enemies interact with it. The player can swim but is limited by stamina, while the enemies just die instantly. I suppose this is a good way to cheese enemies, but it highly depends on where they are found. Most of the time, patrolling guards can be found near civilized areas, and they can fight enemies that they come across. Some enemies can also fight amongst themselves without human intervention, which is quite a nice surprise. This happens frequently without any action from the player, which is good because it makes the world feel more alive even if these interactions aren't entirely random. Occasionally, I came across tough enemies that are conveniently highlighted with a red aura. They usually had a rather large health bar and they deal enough damage to two-shot a character, so of course the rewards that they drop had to be better. The open world also features different areas, each having a unique boss. There are also hologram bosses with varying difficulty levels, and although I haven't played them as much as I probably should, I like the idea of having more bosses than the standard one for each area. There are also a few special bosses that can only be done 3 times a week, and I assume that is to prevent players from progressing too quickly. One of them is even hidden right behind the area where you start the game, which is pretty cool. The combat in this game is implemented very well, and it isn't surprising at all because it builds on the foundations set in PGR. However, I have an issue with it, especially in the open world, because the lock-on system is quite bad. When killing an enemy, the next target is seemingly selected based on how close they are to the center of the screen, not how close they are to your character. This even happens when the target is far away, even if they are not in combat with you. Also, the only way to switch targets is by pressing the lock-on button again, which means you don't get to choose which target to switch to. I can't believe this game launched with a lock-on system like this. Like, let's say when I play Dark Souls and when I lock on and I move my mouse left and right, it would change targets. It does nothing here. I have to press this again. And that one is fine, but it's random. It's been like this since the start as far as I know because I played on day 2. I don't know if they have any plans to change it. I tried to get around this by fighting enemies without locking on and manually moving my camera around and directing my attacks using my movement, but I ran into even more problems. And when I'm not locked on, let's say I move my stick to the left and attack, it doesn't attack the target on the left, or it doesn't move my character to attack the left one, except when it does, and then it feels weird. Like when I press like A and I click on the mouse, I expect my character to turn left and attack, even if the target is on the right. If the target is on the right and I press left and attack, he only attacks the left side if there's another enemy on the left side and if it's close enough. But man, this targeting system, this lock-on system is not very good. Although the lock-on system is quite poorly implemented, the combat itself is excellent and the enemies are varied enough so that combat doesn't feel too repetitive. While I am quite happy with the gameplay provided by the open world, I am not that big of a fan when it comes to the aesthetics, specifically the color palette. During the first trailers and the technical tests, the world was painted with muted colors, but after some complaints that the world doesn't have enough color compared to other games, the developers decided to turn up the saturation of the entire game. In my opinion, this is a huge mistake, as TDs are portrayed as a massive threat to humanity just like the punishing virus in PGR, so having a desaturated color palette for the setting makes perfect sense. The artists at Kuro understood this and have succeeded before. Unfortunately, they were told to step back on this idea, likely because of backlash, and the game suffers because of it. If the developers had stuck to their original vision, the game would have a more cohesive setting. Unfortunately, the characters can fall into this trap as well. Because the developers somehow feel the need to fit in lively characters into a gacha game, the behavior or design of some characters conflict with the setting. I don't know why they chose to do this, especially since they have struck a good balance in their PGR characters. I'm not saying that injecting color into the environment or a character design is a bad idea. When used sparingly, color can draw attention to certain areas of a character's body. When introduced during specific moments in the story, it can produce great results that elicit more emotion from the viewer. In the case of Wuthering Waves, making the open world more colorful only detracts from the tone of the story, which is quite unfortunate. Color palette aside, the natural landscape and man-made structures complement each other quite well. I also noticed that some of the architecture looks similar to those found in Death Stranding. If they had pushed this style more and kept the desaturated colors of the environment, I'm sure that even more comparisons can be made. So, the presence of rather colorful landmarks and Eastern-style architecture in some populated areas is a good choice. Speaking of populated areas, let's return to the city for a moment. Moving back to the main story, I made my way to the city as directed. Once I arrived at the designated location, the game gave me a free character, one of the 3 present since the beginning. I then came across the city's Nexus Tower, which is like a server hub. Like any good video game main character, I ignore all safety and security protocols and shove my terminal into it without a second thought. Having a character guide the player is a good way to introduce players to a mechanic in an unfamiliar location or setting, and this example teaches players what to look for when seeking to reveal parts of the map. I think it was a good choice to have the Nexus take the form of a tower because it serves as a prominent landmark. The same goes for the other fast travel points in the game. The city also has multiple shops. Materials gathered from the environment or obtained through defeating enemies can be exchanged, used in cooking, or crafted into weapons, consumables, and upgrade materials. The fast travel points around the city are also placed quite well. The presence of multiple side quests and a lot of visually diverse and appealing NPCs serve to make it feel more than just a hub or safe zone for the player. A nice inclusion is a side quest chain known as the Overdash Club, which introduced me to what seems to be the parkour system in the game, going from rooftops while utilizing air dashes, contextual grapple points, and the glider to avoid the ground. The movement in this game feels great, and I'm glad that they put a quest chain that encourages players to improve their movement, especially since the open world has a lot of verticality. After exploring the city, I decided to see Magistrate Jinxi, who is conveniently absent. Instead, her bodyguard, who is also a free 4-star character, is introduced, confirming my suspicions that some people at Kuro have a back fetish, which may be contagious as many players have also grown to love these designs. Hold on a minute, what is she even doing here if she is her bodyguard? Well, as I would later find out, she acts more like an agent than a bodyguard. It seems that the dreaded localization issues are back again. Anyway, I was given a rather lengthy puzzle to solve, which wasn't difficult, just a bit tedious. I don't like padding in video games, and this mundane quest is no exception. Along the way, I found out that I absorbed an echo directly into my mortal flesh and get a vision of the future. Mommy Liv tells me that this image has been sighted before, so the events surrounding it would probably happen again. The game then introduces the gacha system, so I guess there's no better time to talk about it. Remember when I said that Kuro Games is known for their generosity among other things? Well, they seem to be keeping that image for almost everything except the gacha system, or at least a part of it. For character banners, every 10 pulls guarantee a 4-star character. Every 80 pulls guarantee a 5-star character. But for event banners, the dreaded 50-50 applies, so the first 80 pulls act as a coin flip. If you lose the coin flip, like how I did when pulling for Vera 2, you're guaranteed the event character or the next 80 pulls, so the heart pity is actually 160. Thankfully, just like PGR, players can earn astrites just like black cards by just playing the game and can save up quite a lot of it over time. An option to exchange these astrites for standard or event pulls is available at any time, which is quite nice. By the time the Vera 2, or should I say the Vera 3 banner came out, I had 80 event pulls saved up, but that wouldn't save me. After obtaining a seemingly guaranteed Mommy Live, fucking Sephiroth, Miss Stock Exchange, and Markiplier in that order, the game finally decided to make me open my wallet, which I eventually did. Doing so not only gave me Vera 3 but also Changyu 2, Kamui 2, and many copies of Markiplier and male Bayonetta. I don't know if failing my first 50-50 was truly unlucky, but I suppose that doesn't matter anymore. All I'll do now is save up and invest in the characters I currently possess. Other than the 50-50 system, which I'm pretty sure was only implemented because the developers needed to make back the money they spent on this rather impressive game, everything else about the gacha system is pretty good, although it would be nice if players could view their current progress and select the number of pulls instead of being locked to 1 and 10. Going back to the main story, I had to sit through even more exposition and dialogue, which does not leave a good impression at all because the main story retains the rather slow pace that it started with. When I left the city to continue my quest, the game allowed me to try out a 5-star character during a short combat scene, which I didn't notice until the end of the fight. I would obtain her much later, but at this point I would only be seeing her in this part of the main quest. I then visited a garrison where I spotted a rare species of infinitely spawning soldiers. But more importantly, I got another vision, which led to another 5-star character trial that is thankfully longer than the previous one. It is also pretty good in terms of pacing and presentation, which is a welcome change from the rather boring dialogue sections that came before. Only fitting that he's the first event character. Oh shit, how do I play him? Oh, hello? Oh shit! What? You're fighting a dragon now? I would not obtain Jade General Ishin, but I would later grow to enjoy his gameplay and character. Allowing players to try out characters that they have not obtained is a great way to entice players to get them. Having attractive characters is important for a gacha game, and Wuthering Waves succeeds at it through both visual design and gameplay. Even the character trials are baked into the story, which isn't necessary, but they did it anyway. Not only is he easy to understand, he is actually really strong in terms of damage. The game then introduces the training mode for characters and mechanics like dodging, which should have been made available since the very beginning. In fact, the game should prompt a tutorial whenever the player obtains a new character, but not only is it out of the way, but the only other way to learn how to play these characters in-game is by reading an essay and figuring out which buttons to press. Their descriptions have not improved in the slightest, so I'd suggest watching a guide or playing the tutorial instead. You know, there was a time when Kuro Games had ability descriptions that were 1 or 2 sentences long. Now we're lucky if they go below 2 paragraphs. The next part of the main story introduces tacit fields, which are used for echo material farming. This particular one is located in a village that has seemingly been corrupted in some way. Further investigation unveils some kind of ritual going on in the village, which is quite unremarkable compared to another bit of information that is not immediately obvious. It turns out that TDs are attracted to frequencies from living beings, and it is implied that feeding on them is required for reproduction. It isn't revealed until much later, but absorbing the frequency of a being allows a TD to somehow replay the memories of the victim, which is why this one is acting this way. I was then told about a group whose name I had trouble pronouncing, so I'm just going to call them Scar's buddies, whose representative figure is introduced next. After rudely teleporting Lucia 2 to another plane of existence, Scar introduces himself to the Rover. Fortunately, he is only here to talk, and after giving me a good impression of Roland from PGR and telling me a little story, he teleports me to another dimension and challenges me to a boss fight. Since he doesn't use his second phase, I easily take him down. Oh, hey, come on man, I wasn't ready. Well, he doesn't deal too much damage, so it's not that bad. He just parried me. He then teleports away, leaving us to continue our investigation. Following the TD from before, we enter a cave and find a diary. For now, no more information is conveyed, so the investigation ends there. But upon reviewing this footage, I realized the diary we found belonged to the victim of the TD, which is why it is drawn to it. I think that keeping it a mystery was a good choice because at that point, players would likely still be processing all the information that the game has presented, and another revelation would probably only provide more confusion. It is also important not to overload players with game mechanics early on, so the introduction of union levels, daily activity quests, and the battle path at this part of the main story was a good choice in my opinion. Overworld bosses are also unlocked at this point, and of course I return to the Crownless, who has different moves compared to his first appearance, including a long powerful combo. I found this version to be more difficult and enjoyable, which is exactly why it wasn't used as the first boss. I think this is a good way to reuse a boss while keeping it fresh even when players are at a higher level. Speaking of levels, my union level wasn't high enough for the main story chapter at this point, so I decided to do some exploration quests. Maybe it's because my expectations can't get very high anymore, but I found the stories to be especially well written. There is also quite a bit of padding as well, which is usually found in the middle portion of the quests. Other than that, I'd highly recommend them. Each of these quests features a boss fight at the end, and at least 2 of these quests also have special environment modifiers that are removed after the quest. The quest that features the Sea of Flames utilizes the area like a From Software poison swamp, which is annoying on paper. But the game gives players a healer, so it's not that bad. After I defeated Ghost Rider, who resides in the middle of the area, I get a cool highway section, and after getting rid of whatever plagued the Sea of Flames, the health drain effect is removed, which makes it far more pleasant for exploration. The second of these exploration quests features the Guardian Ape, which resides at the bottom of what I assume to be some kind of spirit tree. The area around it looks like a poison swamp, but it acts completely differently. The game does not convey this very well, but the only thing that the toxic spores do is fill up a status bar. Once the bar was full, the game kicked me back outside the area. It turns out that the game put a time limit on me, which was quite annoying because I'd have to occasionally exit the area to reset the timer. Oh, so that's the status effect. I thought it would be like, you know, reducing my health or my damage or whatever, but No, it's just a time limit on how long I can be here. So that's the time limit mechanic, but there's nothing to suggest that this thing is bad for me other than the game saying that it is, because my health is not decreasing, I'm not dealing less damage, my movement is not impaired. As far as I know, if it's not for that little icon at the bottom, I wouldn't know that this thing is this environment has its own special effect to it. And I think it's not implemented very well, unfortunately. Now I'm going to have to get out of here again, and then wait for the timer to reset and then go back in. And that is annoying, it's a time waster. Once the boss is defeated, the tree and the entire surrounding area undergoes a metamorphosis and the time limit mechanic is removed. The spirit tree was already one of the best looking landmarks in the game, and it looks even better now. The final quest I'd like to show features the Morning Ikes, as well as an area shrouded in fog housing the most interesting mechanics by far. Okay, I should probably try this out. Oh shit! Holy shit, that was by accident, but okay, I'll take it. Whoa, 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 what the? Wow, this... It's like I can one-shot everything right now. This one has the best story among them in my opinion, along with the best presentation. After defeating it, the game gave me another landmark. Although it is less impressive than the spirit tree, it still looks pretty good on its own. There is one issue I take with the bosses in these exploration quests, and it is that they are available for resource farming in the open world before defeating them in their respective quests. The developer seemingly wanted players to finish the quests first because they serve as an introduction to the bosses, while making the surroundings more pleasant for exploration. It's like how the Crownless is made available for resource farming after its defeat in the main quest. I believe that doing this for all of them would be a more graceful method of introducing players to the world, but since this is an open world game, it really can't be helped. My urge to explore the world got me to defeat Ghost Rider before doing its quest, so I didn't get a proper introduction to the boss. Luckily for me, this wasn't the case for the others. There are also several side quests which feature pretty good stories, such as this one which delves into another unique phenomenon in the world of Wuthering Waves. Retroact Rain, which replays events from the past, is introduced here and plays a big role in the story because it conveys information through the phantoms of long dead people. The game goes into more detail in the main story much later on, so I'll leave it here for now. Speaking of the main story, let's return to the rather tedious puzzle I spoke about. So far, the main quest had me going through a lot of dialogue, which as stated before does not leave a good first impression due to its slow pace. Like the rest of the puzzles in the game, this main story puzzle was probably not meant to be difficult, so it was pretty bland in my opinion. There were also some enemies sprinkled throughout which felt out of place, especially since this was supposed to be one of the most secure places known to us. However, it did surprise me with the beautiful chamber leading to the Grand Library, which surely took a lot of time to design. Going through the familiar hallway again, I approached the Grand Library and met Scar. Turns out he can teleport in here for some reason. Jinxie and Beck Fetish Agent arrive to help, but because they aren't the main character, they fail to restrain him. This leads to a second boss fight, and this time Scar decides to show me his second phase. This fight is definitely better than the previous encounter, as not only does it provide more of a challenge, it also has more spectacle to it. Grab attack. Oh shit, he did the Hulk thing. That was weak. Despite trying his best to imitate a certain Omen King, he is defeated and restrained. Unfortunately for me, he has a layer of plot armor, so I wasn't allowed to finish him off. Later, Jinxi introduced herself and explained that the city's guardian dragon is somehow being held captive by Scar's gang. Her search for this guardian delayed her from meeting sooner, so I guess all that tedious dialogue and puzzle sections had a valid reason to exist after all. She said that they plan to cause another massive TD outbreak referred to as the Lament, possibly using her guardian as some form of tool or catalyst. All this information about the antagonists is rather interesting because it could easily build up to something greater, and perhaps we could infiltrate Scar's base and free the guardian in a later chapter. I'll get back to this part later. For now, we return to Scar, who is thrown in jail with a very anticlimactic black screen. Jinxi then directs me to speak to the general from my earlier vision and tells me about Black Shores, which is a secretive organization dedicated to assessing the threat of TDs and predicting when the next lament will happen. Jinxi then leaves the city again to continue her search, so I go and search for Black Shores members. As all Black Shores members wear a special black flower, we go to Dr. Inverse Usain Bolt and ask her for her advice. Despite looking like she doesn't even belong in this game, her knowledge of the environment turns out to be quite useful. She even makes one of those flowers for us using her special powers. As for the nickname, she's the worst runner in the game because she's among the shortest characters. I don't know why the developers decided to give characters different movement speeds based on their height, but oh well, at least it makes sense. Going back to Black Shores, it turns out that they have been keeping an eye on me from the beginning, and the agent that has been following me this whole time was close by. I fight off a few bad guys who found their way here and after some more searching exposed the agent. She put up a rather decent fight, but since she isn't the main character, she lost. Or maybe it was on purpose, who knows. In a rather lewd scene, the Rover pins her down and interrogates her, and although she was in no danger due to the blade not even touching her neck, she decided to come clean anyway. She reveals that she is from Black Shores and that she had been getting rid of enemies that tried to get to me, confirming my suspicion that they were not on the same side. Thanks to the Rover's sad excuse of an interrogation, she broke free and disappeared, finally introducing herself as Camel. Although she was not trustworthy, it seemed that she was working for the right people, which was enough for me to decide to work with her in the future. After a while, I returned to the city to search for more Black Shores members and run into male Bayonetta and his child, who were very carefree despite their identities. Then they disappeared and ran. Of course, the party split up to look for him, and of course only the Rover was able to find him. They then revealed that they were Black Shores members and directed me to an area that I have previously discovered. As they left, they recruited the Rover and reminded me to go to the meeting alone. For some reason, they have some form of allergy to meeting other people, even if they are the Rover's companions who can aid their efforts considerably. When I reached the meeting spot, I was given some rather interesting lore. The resonance beacons that I've been using for fast travel were set up by Black Shores to monitor the environment, which helps them predict the lament. The one at the lab was broken, or it would have been if I hadn't activated it beforehand. As I entered the research lab, I found out what retroact rain really is. It is an extra-dimensional phenomenon that is comprised of 3 stages. First, it falls to the ground like normal rain. Then it records information while suspended in mid-air. Finally, it rises upwards and replays the information in the form of phantoms. We also learned that the researchers here tried to recreate it and were in cahoots with Scar and his little friends. They almost succeeded but ended up dying, a rather fitting end for a bunch of mad scientists. Our investigation at the lab is finished, but before I continue, I want to state a very big issue I have with the characters in this game. Ever since the beginning of the game, every single character had been putting their trust in the Rover even though nobody knows anything about him or her. This makes the characters feel somewhat artificial because there is no reason for them to treat the Rover so well so quickly. For instance, male Bayonetta and his child being so quick to trust the Rover of all people with important information even though they are from a secretive organization doesn't sit well with me, especially since they could have easily went to more trustworthy individuals such as Back Fetish Agent or Lee 2.0 or Mommy Liv or any other person of authority or access. The same issue is present for the main characters in the beginning of the game. Apparently in one of the beta tests, Lee 2.0 points a gun at the Rover when they first meet because it's the safe thing to do. Instead, she and everyone after her in the final game starts trusting the Rover even though they have little reason to. The only reason I can think of is because the Rover is the main character and that is not a good way to tell a story. Nobody acts standoffish or puts their guard up around the Rover even if only for a while. There is no tension between the characters and we don't see them get over it and work together by the end. I'm not sure if this is true, but I've heard that some players complained before the game's release that some of the other characters weren't treating the main character like the main character from the beginning, so the developers changed it. I'm sensing a pattern here, the developers trying to appease fans at every turn from the color palette to the characters acting unnatural has somewhat compromised their vision for the game, the setting, and the characters. How unfortunate. Returning to the main story, this is where the writing takes a bit of a weird turn. Ever since the first meeting with Scar, the game had been building up his faction as the main antagonists of the story, even going so far as to capture Jinzhou's guardian dragon to further their goals. It would make perfect sense to have the final chapters of the main story, or at least what's there during the game's release, revolve around this faction. I stated earlier that the player could infiltrate their base and free the guardian, and I would like to build upon that idea. Perhaps the Rover would fight the woman who accompanied Scar at the village, and when he or she succeeds, the Guardian would be freed and returned to Jinxi. This would force the villains to search for alternative methods to bring about another lament, which could draw out the story and introduce more characters. Maybe this woman would be killed and Scar would have a valid reason for hating the Rover, which presents an opportunity for more character development. There's so much that they could have done with the antagonists since they have built them up over the course of the story, which surprised me when they chose to do this instead. Apparently they have already found a way to cause another lament or something similar to it, and Jinzhou is under attack by all the TDs they summoned. We then cut to Jade General Ishin as he talks to a few of his soldiers about managing hallucinations caused by retroact rain. At first I thought that this was just a simple exposition dump, but then the game gave me a nice surprise. Oh shit, no wonder. This is a big deal. This phenomenon is extremely rare as phantoms tend to become physical beings that can hurt and kill people if the situation gets worse. What makes this even more interesting is that retroact rain can often occur during a big battle, and when that happens, soldiers who just died a while ago can come back as phantoms and cause even more damage. Those who are still alive can get confused as to which of their comrades are with them and which are hallucinations, causing their defenses to break up over time. This premise, along with all the related information that I've laid out over the course of this video, cements retroact rain as the most interesting and unique phenomenon in Wuthering Waves in my opinion. It's a great concept that the writers came up with, and I hope that they use it more in future story chapters. The next part of the story takes us to Norfall Barrens, which was added after the beta tests. The illusory moon I saw in my vision a while ago is now here, which is accompanied by a massive TD outbreak that directly threatens the city. The game then shows me this mysterious woman again, and this time she actually does something. Somehow she is able to orchestrate the attack and manipulate TDs, but since we aren't shown what else she can do or if others can do the same, this alone isn't exactly a good representation of her power level. However, it does make the antagonists a bit more interesting, as at least one of them is able to call upon forces that humans really shouldn't be messing with, and this creates opportunities for future development. Going back to the city, an all-out defense is in effect, and several playable characters are introduced here. This is not a very good time to do so since this is the last part of the main story as of the release of this video. Perhaps having shorter side quests tied to each character that become accessible as one obtains them is a better way to introduce them, but since they are in the main story, I think it was a good choice to place most of them in the background. While everyone else was defending the city, I was given another task: strike at the heart of the enemy. Thankfully, we have a large, highly visible, stationary target that's impossible to miss with this disruptor cannon we now have. Up till this point, Wuthering Waves' main story has been quite well written if a bit poorly paced, but it kind of stops making much sense past this point. Firstly, the disruptor seems contrived since it wasn't featured in any cutscenes before this chapter, and I didn't come across it in the open world beforehand. Second, it has been present since the founding of Xinzhou, which by itself can mean that the technology would be lost to time, like how no one knows how to build a 406mm gun today. However, this is not the case, as upon asking if more of these cannons can be built, I was told that it was possible. So why haven't they built more of this so that if the city was ever threatened again, they could defend it more effectively? I was not given an answer, for some reason. Later, I was told that firing the cannon would cost a lot of energy and it may cause serious damage to the city if it misfired. So why didn't they develop a safer and more efficient version of this old weapon and surround the city with it? It would be the most sensible option in this setting, but apparently no one ever thought of it for some reason. It doesn't take a lot of writing knowledge to notice something like this, and it's really disappointing to see that the story kind of breaks like that at the end. Oh right, this other bit also needs to be addressed. As I pointed out during my stream, this all feels like late game stuff, which would fit better if there were more chapters that slowly built up towards it. For a while, I refused to believe that the main story was this short, especially since there was so much dialogue in between the interesting sections. Unfortunately, this is probably all the developers could squeeze into the game before its release, so I wouldn't really fault them for it. Moving forward, I fought past a lot of TDs and reached a rather cool parkour section that features the grapple, which is now used to pull debris towards the player. This could be expanded upon in the future, for example, maybe we'll get to pull enemies towards us in combat. As I got closer to the target, they used the cannon to blast a hole in the wall for me to progress. I suppose no one told them that resonators can run up walls and that I could have found another way up. Besides, it would have been better to direct its fire towards the target instead. Next, the game shows me a very pretty cutscene as the general and I make our way up to the target with the help of Lucia 2 and the plot device cannon. Wow, if only we could move at that speed in game. Then I was shown one of the most beautiful boss arenas in the game. The Crownless faces me again, and since I was kind of used to fighting it by now, I easily take care of it. Then the game presented me with one of its best bosses in terms of visual design, presentation, and moveset. The Dreamless is my favorite boss in this game, and I think that it was a great choice to use it as the final boss. While this footage plays, I want to explain why I'm using so many PGR tracks in this video. It is of my opinion that the music in Wuthering Waves varies a lot in terms of quality and immersion, which is a shame because their previous game is well known for having a great selection of tracks. While the exploration tracks for various regions are well made and fit very well into the setting, the combat music is subpar and way too soft, especially when it comes to fighting enemies in the open world. I had the in-game music set to full volume and I could barely hear it in combat, including the boss fights. This left a poor impression on me because not only did the opening cutscene and menu music give a strong first impression, but boss fights are the perfect opportunity to show off the best music that the game has to offer, and they just dropped the ball, which is very unfortunate. Speaking of balls, the game throws me a curveball during the fight and reveals that the Rover has a dark form. This whole time, the Rover used spectral damage, but now an alternative playstyle and damage type is available. Rover Havoc, as I would later find out, is an absolute unit. In both forms, the Rover is an excellent character capable of dealing a ton of damage, especially since both forms use a nuclear bomb as his or her super move. I wouldn't be surprised if some of the developers played a fighting game or something where the main character is extremely strong for whatever reason and decided to do the same to the Rover. While I would understand and later main Rover Havoc, I had trouble getting used to the new moveset here, so the Dreamless turned out to be quite the challenge. Dreamless, Blade of Extinction. Okay, Alpha. I get it. Okay. Okay, I'm in super mode. Ouch. I'm not invincible. My moves changed as well. Oh, F. Oh, he gets a fighting game assist. What's my super move? Oh my god. The music isn't loud enough. It really isn't. I can barely hear it. And that is a bad thing. And I have it on full. Ouch, I'm being comboed. Ah, shit. Whoa, 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 what is this? Ooh. Oh my god. I hope we get her as an echo. I pressed the wrong button. So it's just the same nuclear bomb, but a different color, okay. I thought we get a different super move. Re-establish resonance with the level. Here it can slowly restore HP. Oh, never mind. I believe that will be irrelevant. Man, the animation team really deserves a raise. They should get one if they didn't get one already. After I defeated it, it retreated so that it could return as a weekly boss, and in its place appeared some weird animal thing with seemingly no explanation. Talk about being out of place. This chapter ends with a nice cutscene, and that was when I realized that that was the end of the main story. There is some good news, however. The corpse of the giant TD is left suspended in mid-air, and like the spirit tree, it becomes a whole new landmark, which makes the Norfall Barrens more visually interesting. This is also where the General's companion story is unlocked, so I guess this is a good point to talk about it. Unlike many of the side quests, companion quests feature unique environments and even mechanics. Each companion quest revolves around a single playable character and explore their backstory and motivations a bit more. They also feature pretty cutscenes that other side quests lack. However, there are low points somewhere in every one of these quests, so they are not perfect. The General's quest also delves a bit deeper into the lives of regular soldiers and adds a bit more lore. Earlier, I explained that TDs can inherit people's memories by absorbing their frequency, and this quest is where that information comes from. The side quests in this game vary on quality, but the companion quests are the best among them. This should come as no surprise since they are classified differently in the menu. I suppose this would be a good time to talk about the additional content that I haven't been able to fit into the rest of the video. If you consider the combat in Wuthering Waves a bit too easy, the Tower of Adversity and Alloy Smelt are made for you. Both have time limits, and players get more rewards if they can quickly defeat a boss in Tower of Adversity or gather more points in Alloy Smelt. I wish these two were permanently available because they scratch an itch that the rest of the game does not provide. In contrast, Depths of Elusive Realm is a more casual game mode reminiscent of something like PGR's Kigal Archives, which was available during some events. Similarly, it allows players to try out select characters they have not obtained yet, and that included the female Rover in my case. This game mode heavily encourages the usage of echoes and features moves that are not normally available, such as transforming into the Crownless, which grants access to extremely powerful abilities unique to this echo and game mode alone. It's very fun and challenging as well, which makes it even more unfortunate that this isn't permanently available. I hope that these events along with Overdash Club will return in future patches because they add quite a bit of content to the game and gives players who have finished the main and side quests something else to do besides echo farming and character building. I guess that's all I have to say for Wuthering Waves so far. Note that even though this game is getting updated, most of this video should still be relevant. Or maybe that's just what I like to tell myself to rid myself of guilt for procrastinating too much. That's why this video took so long, by the way, other than the fact that I had to sort through about 30 hours of stream footage. Apparently, the more I wrote the script, the more it drifted away from the usual review and first impressions formats that I had in mind, and turned into more like a retrospective format, which is quite strange for a game that didn't come out too long ago. Oh well, I'm not rewriting the whole script, so this is what we end up with, a video that somehow became way longer than intended. Alright, that's all for my first impressions and review for Wuthering Waves. Thanks for watching.